Hey, what's up, guys? Quick video. You were looking at my very first 1080p LCD. This was the Samsung 2008 full 1080p Touch of Red. This display, now at my in-laws up at Myrtle Beach, was my very first high-end display. In the other room I have a Sony Grand Vega projection LCD, which is 1080i, but this was the very first LCD that I purchased that had that amazing wow factor. And what made me fall in love with Samsung at that time, as Samsung was known for their color and their very, very sharp image. Sony couldn't hang at the time with how sharp the image was, how detailed, and Samsung is still known for that color and that certain Samsung look and their motion. At the time, this was the very first. Sony did have one around the exact same time that had the 120 hertz. It said it was a 120 hertz panel, but it had the option for 120 hertz motion that you could turn on, motion interpolation. Just to give you a little look into how thick they were back in the day. An OLED is actually thinner than this bezel here, but this curved was considered kind of an aesthetic at the time. It does still have 4 HDMI ports, one on the side. It also still has S-Video, which a lot of people liked back then. You had your audio jacks, yellow, white, and red. You also have all of your legacy connections in the back, your component cables. You have cables for PC, headphone jack, but even then you had 4 HDMIs. Now what's interesting, at this time, back then, LCDs were actually lit from the sides. And what's interesting with that is it limited flashlighting and clouding. So here you are looking at an image from 2007, and I am here off angle, and it looks fine. Now in the camera you're going to see what looks like some flash lighting. It's really just my camera. The black bars are very black on an LCD, if you can imagine. The ability to keep light under control on the edges was much easier than across the entire top of the screen. It didn't really impact the black bars so much at the time. This was my very first TV that I was absolutely in love with, the complete wow factor. My father-in-law did not keep the original remote, so I can't go into the settings, but the settings are very similar to the settings that we all have today. Samsung has always been limited in their settings, but they were simple, right to the point. The motion on 120 hertz, I do remember a lot of artifacting and blurring, but it was the very first time I had seen the soap opera effect. And the styling, like I said, very large bezel, red, which wasn't to everybody's taste, but you can look this TV up. Just look up 2008, I believe, Samsung Touch of Red, and it'll come right up. Now the styling also had a little bit of the clearness, but as you can tell, it would also crack. And also at this particular time, all TV manufacturers loved putting their logo. Instead of being in the corner very small and conspicuous, they now, back then, you should see the Sony in the other room. It's just huge. Boom, it just says Samsung. And I think the Vizios at the time would glow. What's funny, my kids are watching this, don't judge me, but what's funny is that you really don't see any of the clouding or any of the artifacting that you would see during normal viewing on an LCD or an LED now, which I find very interesting. That's why I felt like newer displays with the smaller bezel, thickness, and mixture of extremely high peak brightness is causing the flash lighting that we see in some of the displays that we love now. And why we have so many defects is that instead of having such a large body to house the panel and the boards in, everything is so small and so tight and made together to fit so tight, which is why we end up with so many problems. Now, unfortunately, they didn't keep the remote, so I can't show you the different motion settings or what settings are archaic compared to the ones that we use now. But I had this TV calibrated before they took it, so they probably have it on the standard mode. Back then, reflection was also tough because you would see the reflection on the actual bezel. You'd see the reflection also on the inside of the bezel. So during movies, you would notice that. But looking very closely at it, the only time you'd ever see any light bleed in these images was really under that little line. But it's just amazing that this TV has literally been it's been in my life since 2008 and holds up far better than the TVs that came after. And that theory with the thinner bezels and the thinner body is really my own theory, but it doesn't make sense. Now, also, off angle, not bad. For an LCD, my 900E off angle is 10 shades lighter. And you can also see blooming off angle on my 900E, and TVs these days have so many flaws. I mean, you don't see any light bleed. There is no clouding, nothing. Now, I don't have any of my stuff with me, any of my game systems or anything, so I can't properly show you any real content other than what is here playing. But it's really impressive to look at what was considered one of the best TVs of the time. Samsung Touch of Red. Brings a tear to my eye. This was an amazing TV. What's interesting, though, I will say this, guys, is that we talk about with 4K displays that 4K Blu-rays don't really do justice to what 4K can actually do. What is interesting at this time, gaming couldn't do justice. If you put in a Pixar movie on this TV, your jaw was on the floor. But an Xbox 360 or a PS3, remember guys, those were only 720p at best. So having games hooked up to this really never did it justice, simply because there was never that native 1080p game. And it was really kind of unheard of at the time to hook up a PC to one of these. It just didn't make any sense as far as the refresh rate or how they would talk to each other. I'm not sure you could use HDMI back then. It might have been just DVI ports in 2008. But just very interesting. Let's turn the lights off real quick. Pause it. Okay, lights are off. Here we are. We're off center. And that is a pretty bright image. So again, modern TVs within modern high-end LED, even off-center this much, you would have degradation of image. I also do believe edge lighting or edge lit displays from the side is a much better way to light the display, but I think they were very limited on peak brightness. So going from the top to the bottom, less distance to travel for optimal output of light. But very, very impressed to go back. Now the projection LCD I have in the other room does not hold up nearly as well. Now here we are farther back in the sweet spot. And this is very watchable today. And my in-laws enjoy it. They have no issues with it, but leave in the comments where your old TVs have gone and if you still can see them, or your fondest memory of your first HDV LCD. All right, guys, thank you as always, and thank you for taking this trip down memory lane with the Samsung Touch of Red, one of my favorite displays of all time.